Just Breathe Live is a YouTube live stream where youth ministry has a say. Hosts Shannon Harper and Eric Bliss interview youth and adult badasses who hold a vision of liberal, religious youth ministry that is both life-saving and spirit-lifting. Come join us via the chat for real-time conversations where your ideas matter and your questions get answered. Explore faith, spirituality, and life purpose as never before. And above all, bring your authentic self and just breathe.
Badasses.
Every time I hear it, I'm like, we did that.
I know. I get a little jolt of adrenaline when he says that.
I get a little jolt of embarrassment. Like, why did we? I have to admit, there's a little cringe in me that's like,
oh, the cringe.
It seemed cool at the time, but it's okay.
You know, well, we could bleep it out. Youth
That'll
ministry.
All right, welcome. If you are joining us tonight, this is our second show of 2022, which is kind of cool. We're doing 2 shows in January. I'm Shannon Harper, and
I'm Eric Bliss. Last time I checked. And we do have 2 badasses tonight, though.
I mean, yeah, it's accurate. It's not that it's not accurate. It's just, it's okay.
It's what is it? It's tongue in cheek. I mean, it was written as tongue in cheek, but I think
yeah.
It's
what happens when 2 40-some-year-old like ex-punk rock, hippie people decide
trying so hard, people,
have a live
cool.
stream together.
Are we succeeding? You tell us in the chat. Please don't.
Yes.
Please don't comment.
That's what we need. We need positive recognition and
that's right.
Affirm
us, please.
All right, so we should get into it tonight, right? I'm super excited about what's going to happen tonight. We should also mention, and we always forget to mention this, but I'm looking at our script and I'm like, oh, we always forget this. But this is a Unitarian Universalism show. And so we are talking to youth and young adults who identify as Unitarian Universalists or within the Unitarian Universalist sphere of influence, I guess is maybe how you would say that. If you would like more information about Unitarian Universalism, which is a faith, then you can go to uua.org. Pretty easy, uua.org, and learn all about Unitarian Universalism.
Lifelong UU right here. Thanks for reminding us about that, Shannon. Yeah, we always forget to say that. And if you're not Unitarian Universalist, you're also welcome to join us. We are here and we're talking about liberal faith topics that focus on youth and emerging adults, young adults. And so we're centering those voices, trying to center those voices in the conversation, moving us forward as a society towards a kinder, gentler, more just group of people that are spirit-centered,
Yeah.
Leaning into love. So let's check in.
Yeah. So for our check-in question tonight, we were like, oh, what should we like? What could it be? And it's the new year, but then also we're talking about climate justice today. And so we thought, hey, let's go old school. Like let's go back to the basics and do a weather report check-in, because that's like one of my favorite check-ins.
Climate justice, weather report.
Weather report, yeah. So what is the weather looking like in your sphere right now?
Well, meteorologically, it's chilly and it's clear. It was a very sunny day. It was a beautiful day here in Salt Lake City, Utah, the unceded land of the Ute, Paiute, Goshute, and Shoshone nations. In terms of my own personal weather report, I'll give you, it's partly cloudy. It's partly cloudy. These are tough times to have little kids, and I've got 2 smalls right now and a teenager about to graduate, and navigating childcare and all the rigors of that. I just feel for families right now because we're feeling it. It's rough. It's been a long 2 years. And I'll just leave it at that. How are you doing? What's your weather report?
Yeah, the weather report here in Dayton, Ohio, it can't make it up its mind, which is, I guess, I from what I understand, that's kind of the way it is around the country, and also probably how I'm feeling within my own self right now. But it snowed today. I think the snow's kind of gone now, but it snowed today. It was cold, and then it'll probably be warm tomorrow. I don't know what the actual weather forecast is, but it's kind of all over the place, and that's kind of how I feel right now. A little unfocused, a little everywhere. I've got some great ideas and thoughts coming in through my brain, and yet it's like focusing on any one thing is hard. So yeah, I guess I'm feeling that there's probably a term for that when like the weather like fluctuates greatly from one extreme to the next extreme. Hopefully no like tornadoes or anything are brewing. But yeah, my weather's unstable. That sounds bad. Like that sounds that sounds bad. I wouldn't say unstable, unpredictable. Maybe that's it. Yeah.
Unpredictable. Well, predictably, we breathe together. We call this thing Just Breathe Live, and we are committed to spiritual practice, getting centered together as we do religious work. And so I invite you to close your eyes as you're inspired, soften your gaze, if not, and dig down deep, dig your feet into whatever turf is beneath them. Your sit bones, ease them into your chair or sofa or divan, and take some deep breaths with me. Let's do 3 deep cleansing breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, and just call our high selves into the space. Here we go. Two more. Last one. If you have a mantra, it's a good time to use it. Mine is be the tree. That's a whole nother story. We're not going to get into be the tree, but that is my mantra.
That could be a whole check-in question somewhere.
Hey, yeah. What is your mantra?
Internal mantras. Mm-hmm.
I like it. But let's not waste time talking about us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have 2 amazing guests with us. I would love to introduce to you Noella Prescott. They are a Canadian youth who is passionate about climate justice, anti-racism work, and dance. Since she was young, she has been involved with many social justice movements, including climate justice through attending protests with her parents. Noella tries to approach her social justice work with a lens of intersectionality. She is currently a youth dean for the Climate Forced Displacement themed UU United Nations Office 2022 International Spring Seminar. Noella is excited to share her thoughts on climate justice and learn from other perspectives. Welcome, Noella.
Welcome. Our other guest is Zoe Johnston. Welcome, Zoe. Zoe is a lifelong Unitarian Universalist who grew up in Colorado. She is a senior international studies major at Arcadia University, a senior already. Located outside of Philadelphia. Sorry, Zoe and I go way back in youth ministry circles. As a senior, and will be graduating this spring. Zoe serves as the network coordinator for Unitarian Universalist Young Adults for Climate Justice, which supports and empowers young adult organizers. She's passionate about intersectional justice, sustainable leadership, and intentional community spaces. Welcome, Zoe. So good to have you both.
Yes. And so we're talking climate justice, and we asked you, I think we sent you a message like, should we call this climate justice? Like, what is the title of this should be? I think somebody had a really good suggestion, and I can't remember what that suggestion was. So we're just saying climate justice.
And will y'all check in? What's your weather report?
Oh yeah. Sorry, I forgot.
Here in Vancouver, it's been pretty cloudy, but there's been a few days recently where the sun's starting to peek out, so that's really nice. I don't think it's been raining too much, so that's good. And internally, I'd say, like right after it snows and it's like really peaceful, but it's kind of like you don't want to leave your house because it's cold, but it's kind of nice to like be inside. That's me right now.
And I am currently in Littleton, Colorado, and it has been sunny but chilly. So we still have some snow on the ground, even though the sun's been shining today. And then the weather in my spirit is, I'd say, a little cloudy. I'm starting my last semester. So this was my first week back to classes, and just balancing everything is always kind of hard, especially that transition back. So school, work, making food and seeing friends safely. It's all kind of a transitional period for me right now.
It's a lot. I think all of us are holding so much. Yeah. All right, let's get into our questions. So first of all, can you all tell us how you got involved in climate action, climate justice work?
Well, as Shannon mentioned in my bio, I've really been involved like my whole life because my parents were very involved, and I know like even when I was a baby, I would get brought to like protests and stuff. I think there's like even a photo of me in some newspaper as a baby at, I don't even know if it's climate justice, but some protest. So I've really been involved my whole life, and I've stayed involved through like school climate action groups and just like kind of, I really want to like make the world a better place. So that's kind of what's been driving me.
Yeah, and I feel like I didn't get explicitly involved in climate activism until just recently, within the past few years. But for me, I think there was never a point in which I got involved just because of nature of growing up in Colorado and growing up, in this generation as Gen Z and growing up UU. So living in Colorado, we would be very aware of the snowfall and if it was a drought season and what was the fire level, and over the past few years having more intense fire seasons that have been more destructive, and just being really aware of that, like living here and being able to smell the smoke during the summers. And then as a youth, it kind of feels like that's just something that we've grown up with. It's not something that you have to learn about or dispute as true, but is something that you're experiencing in your own life. And then also as growing up in UU spaces, I'm a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. Just having this lens towards justice kind of definitely in all of my like Sunday school classes and my communities. So having this lens towards justice and then recognizing how climate justice really holds the intersection of all those different things. So I think that climate justice has always been kind of a background to my life. And it wasn't until within the past 2 or 3 years that I've gotten more explicitly involved just by seeking out different campaigns and getting involved into groups, and now working with the Young Adult Climate Justice Network in Unitarian Universalism.
Awesome.
So Zoe, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was our next question. What are the affiliations? What are the institutions that you work with, and what are your roles? Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and what your institution does?
Yeah, definitely. So I am the network coordinator for UU Young Adults for Climate Justice. It is part of the larger organization, UU Ministry for Earth. And so what I do is I support this network of young adult activists and organizers that are passionate about climate justice. I get to kind of create political education opportunities. We'll be having a book club this season, where we'll be reading a book about climate justice together, and then also creating like and holding spaces for community gathering. So being able to kind of recognize that all of us need community, especially in doing climate justice work. And so holding that space for young adults has been really, really amazing. And then I'm actually also a part of the JUUst office at the United Nations Spring Seminar, which is on climate justice, on the communications and publicity team. But Noella is more part of that, so I'll let her talk about it.
Yeah, so I'm also on the planning committee for that. I'm actually the youth dean. So my job is kind of being on the planning committee and especially the trajectory of learning team and like planning all the different workshops and stuff we're going to be doing at the seminar. And then also during the seminar, I can like help give some of the talks for the workshops or like just really make sure everyone feels comfortable. So that's my role with that. And another role I've been doing is recently in Canada, we started this new program called Mycelium, which is like this youth network across Canada where we can like meet up every few months and have a meeting. So I'm on that planning committee too, and I'm the social justice representative.
That is awesome. Eric and I have actually talked about having some people from Mycelium come and join us because we would love to hear. We love to hear what the Canadians are doing, anyways. You know, I say the Canadians like the Canadians aren't like part of us, but we're all very connected. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so then like you kind of already answered this question, like the projects and things that you're working on. There was the United Nations conference. Is there anything else that's like brewing in your organizations? It's okay if there's not.
I can't think of anything.
Well, I'd like to hear more about the spring seminar. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people who are checking this out probably don't know a lot. I frankly don't know a lot about it. What can you tell us? Is it going to be in person? Is it virtual? And what does the arc of the event look like?
So right now it looks like it's going to be partially having like local gatherings and partially online. So I think it's going to be over a week this year, which is like a really new thing because usually it's just over a weekend. But this year it's going to be a full week, and there's going to be a few days where you can go to like a local congregation and have some in-person activities with them, and a lot of like online activities too, and some recorded ones that you can kind of do whenever you have time to do those. And yeah, this year the theme is climate forced displacement. Every year we have a different theme, but recently we've been trying to keep it with different climate justice related things because that's a really pressing issue of this time.
Yeah, so the spring seminar is going to be really awesome, and it's in April. One project that I'm working on with the JUUst is also kind of in that time. There's a lot of stuff happening around Earth Day, around the spring equinox, May Day. So look out for a lot of climate justice stuff happening in April. But one thing that I'm working on right now is part of Ministry for Earth's Spring for Change. They do a season of sacred activism every year. And this year's theme is Get Rooted, Get Ready. So what is currently in the works and is very early, so not a ton of details, but I'm hoping to offer a series of workshops for young adults about how to get grounded in movement spaces. So really offering tangible skills for young adults that are interested in organizing. So I'm hoping to offer a workshop on climate grief and climate anxiety and kind of coping mechanisms around that. And then also one about health and wellness, both personal and movement health and wellness. And then possibly like a jail support workshop as well. So those are kind of 3 different workshops that will be kind of under the same theme for young adults, but that's the big project that I'm working on right now.
That's fantastic. You said like, tangible, having those tangible things, like I feel like that's what people are really needing right now is like, yeah, but what can I actually do? Not just like, what's in our heads and what's, oh, that's great, but like, what can I actually do? So that's fantastic. It sounds wonderful. And is that just for Is that just for young adults? Like, who's invited to that?
As of right now, it is just for young adults. So to have a space that is young adults, and probably youth will be invited as well, just to have you know, space for really free flowing conversations, and being able to ask questions of each other and kind of build that community even as we're learning about these things, and yeah, learning together and building community together.
And how can people get, like, how can people learn? Like, I guess we should put links in our YouTube channel about that have links to all of these things so people can like learn more and also like register and things if they want to, right?
So what are some things that you've worked on in the past that have given you hope? Like this is a dark time we're living through with the pandemic, and climate change is on. We're seeing it more and more, and I mean it's we're living through it. So like, what are the most recent developments in the work that you've done that have really given you hope? I mean, because being an activist right now, I can see where it could be really like feeling like Sisyphus pushing that rock.
For me, I like really get hope from little like local actions that I see like around me. And this is a very small thing, but like recently we had a clothing drive at my school, and like I saw so many people get really like passionate about it. And like I think what really gave me hope was just like everyone was so excited. Everyone, like, we got so much more clothes than we ever thought we would have gotten. And like to see that so many people were excited with that really made me hopeful. And yeah, just like hearing about things like that in other places really also like motivates me. And I also like this is kind of related, but like I like just hearing like little news stories. And this morning I heard one about how they found like this certain species of coral reef that's like more heat resistant, so it can like come back, and that's really exciting to me. And I think I heard they were trying to like replant some other places too with this certain species. So that's really exciting to me. I hope that can come back.
Yeah, it's like a deeper ocean coral, right?
Yeah, I
like,
think so.
yeah, I was reading about that today. That's awesome.
Yay, yeah.
I'll have to read that article. That's exciting. I think for me, the developments that give me hope is I'm seeing like a tendency of people to recognize climate justice as not just an intellectual and kind of scientific problem, one that we can think about and that there are numbers and statistics, but it's also like deeply personal and emotional and physical. And I'm seeing a lot of people kind of recognizing that in terms of, as I was saying, like doing climate grief workshops, like really holding that grief that people are feeling in losing the world that they've known, and talking about how air pollution is not just the number of quality, but also how it affects people's lungs and how they live, and so of course that's all very very difficult to like recognize the physical impacts, but I think with that turn to this really comprehensive understanding, we're also doing a better job of like holding people through this, both like activists and organizers and just everybody, like being able to write poems about like hope that is founded in like climate, and having songs that are really like grounded in like imagery of the earth, and just really holding spaces for this, like all these feelings that come with climate change, and yeah, just being able to recognize all those emotions and be with each other through that. And so I'm really just, hopeful that the way that we are holding each other through this empowers us even more.
Yeah. In one of the, so I before the pandemic, there's, when we used to get together and spend week-long times together and in community immersives with young people. I did an immersive called River Rising, and that was like, a lot of it was like about like, okay, we know that these changes are going to start happening. We know that our communities are going to be affected. They already are being affected. And like, how does it, like, it kind of sits in you, right? Especially when you're a young person, like when you're older, I mean, I'm scared. I'm very scared of it all. But when you're older, it's like, oh, there's a little less time that you have to deal with it. But when you're a young person, that really sits with you. And so having spaces to be able to process that, and process like, all the emotions and all of the feelings, and then, how to, what you can also do is so important. So, and like so speaking of young people, the world has kind of been looking to young people, it seems like lately, for climate justice, right? Like you have all of these young leaders who are really, being focused on in the media, and they're, like, and which is so important because, obviously, those voices are super important to hear. And I'm curious, from people who are doing this, who are involved in this, how is it like? What is it like with young people? Like, where are you seeing young people being, like, what do I want to say? There's got to be a better way to say what I'm about to say that wasn't right. Okay. How do you see young people being involved in a way that is helpful, and how do you see where it could be exploitive or not, hard, especially being, when you're young, you are also like and also putting into that. I'm putting a lot into one question. I'm sorry. I apologize. I just have a lot of, like, my weather report did say that I was all over the place. Okay. But in this question, I'm also thinking about, like, you're young and you have marginalized identities, right? That are also like, our communities are being affected by climate change and things in different ways. Even like what you were saying, Zoe, about like being in Colorado, and how like you're seeing climate change you're like actually seeing it. I live in Ohio, and we like complain that the winters are like, well, we think colder, and then sometimes we think not as cold. Oh, they're not like they were when I was a kid, but it's not quite the same, in my area, what I'm seeing with that. So all of these things involved, how are how are you seeing young people, and how is it hard to be like young and in a marginalized community and all of that? What are you seeing in your communities? Sorry.
Well, I definitely think, like you were saying, there's a lot of youth leadership, and a lot of people like want youth leadership, which I really like. I really appreciate that. I think a lot of adults are more like willing to listen to youth now. And something I really want to see in the future is like some kind of skill share, or like I want to learn from like people who have been doing this for a really, really, really long time. And I want them to like be able to listen to youth and kind of just like, I feel like there's not that much dialogue that goes on like intergenerationally. Like in a lot of organizing spaces, like either all youth or all older people. And I kind of want to like see more just like everyone being involved together and like listening to each other and like learning from each other and listening to the lived experiences of each other. I can definitely relate to Zoe because I live in BC, and like we have a lot of forest fires as well, and flooding is happening now. So I can also really see like the impacts in my day-to-day life, and I know that there are places in the world where it's even worse and more dangerous. So I also want to like hear from those people. Like I want to just like really listen to each other and like notice the intersections and notice and listen to people who are marginalized. And I think in a lot of spaces also like a problem, at least from what I've experienced, of like a very one-sided view, often like there's a lot of like white people or something like that. And like a lot of spaces I want to hear like just everyone. I just want to hear all these different voices coming together.
Yeah, I think it's really important what Noel's saying about kind of multi-generational spaces. And it's interesting for me being the network coordinator for a young adult group to be able to have this really intentional space for young adults, and to have that space, but then also recognize like how necessary it is to do that multi-generational work in terms of passing down knowledge and sharing experiences, and really like cultivating that multi-generational work, because it's so necessary. But that's something that I kind of struggle with in doing specifically young adult work.
I just want to say in Canada, something I'm really excited about is the Mycelium group that I'm part of just started a partnership with the CUSJ, which is Canadian Youth for Social Justice, I'm pretty sure. And it's really cool. Like a lot of them have a lot of experience and like have been doing this work for so long. And it's really been like cool to hear their experiences and to have them really listen to youth voices too. So yeah.
I think that's so on point, that intergen piece, because, how do we tap into the creativity and wisdom of young people while also bringing to fore those voices that have been around and have, seen a few things. We're not good at that as a species, culturally. I don't, maybe it's a North American cultural issue, you don't, but I think about that a lot, actually. But I appreciate you raising that point. So Noelle, you mentioned, a couple times, you live north of the border and in Vancouver, BC. Do you see differences in the way this climate justice work is done where you are versus, you're doing this partnership with UUNO, which is located in New York City, right? Like what do you see as like differences in emphasis, differences in approach?
Well, I think one big thing, I think definitely in the US it's talked about too, but in Canada, like it's really, really highlighted like the influence of Indigenous voices that should be lifted up, because they've been like protecting the land and listening to the land, and they really understand it more than people who have colonized it in the more recent years. So I think there's definitely like, or at least there should be a lot of like communication between people who have colonized this land and like Indigenous people. And I think it's really important to like tie together reconciliation with climate justice. Like they're really very closely related, and that needs to be talked about more. And I think at least a lot of organizations are trying to do that in Canada and hopefully in the US too. But just from my experience, like it's just, I'll really recognize that we need to bring those voices in and lift them up and just really like hear their wisdom, because they have a lot of wisdom and they know how to protect the land. They know what's going on. They've known it before a lot of scientists or people were talking about it. So yeah, I think that is just like very rooted in decolonization work in Canada, or it should be.
Yeah, that's really interesting, just because, I did some work with Line 3 in Minnesota, Line 3 resistance, and I think both with Line 3 and the Dakota Access Pipeline a few years ago, both of those were so heavily like Indigenous led. And I think it's interesting that so much kind of like conflict and violence has come from both of those, which, is terrible. And for those that don't know, like the Dakota Access Pipeline, there was, tear gas and that on the camps. And then with Line 3, there was increased police presence and, mass arrests. So all these things, but it's very interesting to know that, like, to see that, Noelle, you're talking about like in Canada, like holding those more closely together, and then thinking about like what I've seen in the US being kind of those become sites of conflict, just because it becomes such kind of a radical space in terms of climate justice being also an Indigenous justice issue. So yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Well, and in the US, we just continue to perpetrate acts of genocide and it's like embedded here, and it's absolutely awful. So yeah, I appreciate you lifting that up, Noella.
Yeah, and we definitely do have that problem in Canada as well. And there is a lot of violence going on against Indigenous people still in Canada, unfortunately.
Heartbreaking.
So I'm interested, Zoe, and we were talking about this just before we started recording. But one of the ways in which, or something that the Young Adult Network, and it's the, remind me, it's the Young Adult.
The UU Young Adult Climate Justice Network.
Yeah. See, we always have these long. It's okay. Yes, the UU Young Adult Climate Justice Network. So you put out something recently about divestment from fossil fuels. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, like UU Young Adults for Climate Justice is definitely involved, but is not running it. It's kind of a loose coalition of young adults that are working towards this. So let's see. Okay, so the call for divestment happened in June of 2021. And divestment, generally, for those that may not know, generally means like calling on companies, institutions to pull their money from different places. So to essentially like pull their investments, to divest their money. And so in June of 2021, at the General Assembly, a group of young adults that formed out of the Young Adult Caucus at General Assembly, we had a workshop that was talking about what money the UUA has invested in different corporations. And it came to light that we had the UUA, by means of the Common Endowment Fund, there's a lot of kind of different pieces, but that the UUA had money invested in JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, ConocoPhillips, Citibank, all these kind of financial institutions, and then ConocoPhillips as a oil company. These financial institutions have been major funders in fossil fuel projects. So JP Morgan Chase is one of the highest funders of Line 3. So our money, while not directly supporting Enbridge, and that was a change recently, the UUA had money in Enbridge up until May of 2021. I think that's right, yeah, May of 2021. So even if we don't have these direct investments, by means of these financial institutions, we are still funding those genocidal projects that are destroying Indigenous land, furthering climate change, especially through, furthering the use of fossil fuels over renewables. And so after kind of learning that, I think it's something a little over $2 million is invested in those financial institutions. After that, the young adults kind of got together, organized really quickly to put together a responsive resolution. And that responsive resolution essentially called on the UUA and the Common Endowment Fund to immediately and completely divest from those financial institutions. And of course, there's a lot to be said about, we have a lot of investments in a lot of different places, but to be able to focus on those financial institutions to say, this is urgent, and just say that these are the institutions that we should not have money in because of what our values tell us. Our values tell us to act with justice, compassion, to be in solidarity, and the money that we're putting in is not reflecting that. So our responsive resolution passed with 80% support at the General Assembly, which was very exciting and definitely due to the work of young adult organizers over 2-3 days. So we have pretty pretty huge support from the community. And since then, we've been doing work to kind of push that forward. We're doing a little bit of coalition building with other justice organizations in the UUA. But yeah, that's kind of the basis of what our divestment campaign is. Just, you know, our goal as young adults who have either been raised in this faith or deeply connected to it is that we're trying to live in this world according to our values, and our values aren't just some abstract thing that we tell people when we explain what it is to be a UU. Our values show up in our actions, and one form of actions is our investments. And so what does that mean as a faith organization to have investments that don't reflect our values? So I think that's kind of the crux of what this divestment movement is just really, really clarifying our actions with our values.
So with that resolution passed, what weight does that resolution carry?
Yeah, so a responsive resolution is non-binding. So there's a little bit of difficulty with that. It's much easier to support something that is non-binding of the UUA. And so the work that we're doing now, a more binding resolution is a business resolution. And so while that probably won't happen in 2022, I believe the work is probably scheduled for 2023 to have a business resolution put in place. But the work until then is just to spread information, information and just like coalition building in terms of values and investments. And then a business resolution is the goal for 2023.
I mean, I think what it does, I know what it did for me was, it shines a mirror, right? So it's like you hold up a mirror, and it made me start thinking about my own investments and what I'm doing. So hopefully that's what, like, there's the bigger picture, right, of what are these large organizations, how these large organizations are spending their money, but hopefully it's also starting conversation, with us individuals out here, and where we're putting our money, where congregations are investing money, all of these other entities. So thank you for that work, that accountability work. I mean, I feel like that's a lot of what it is. It's us also, it's you also, holding people accountable for the values that we put into the world, and we want to live in the world, and we preach, holding us accountable to them. So thank you for that work.
Yeah, absolutely. It is loving accountability.
So Noella, we talked about the coral, current events, things are happening, there's data out there, there's news. How can people stay current? How, there's misinformation, alternative facts, people call them here in the States. I'll try not to get sick here on Just Breathe Life. But how can a person stay dialed in and up to date on these issues? Where's a good place to get resourced?
Well, I think definitely a lot of people just kind of look at social media, maybe Twitter, Instagram. And I mean, I think that's a good place to start. And then you have to go look at real resources and get more information before you start spreading things and it just gets out of hand. So for me, I'll see something on Instagram and I'm like, oh, I wonder about that. So I can look it up and look for more reliable resources and learn more of the facts behind it instead of just some clickbait 5-word thing. So that's definitely one tip I use, and I'm still working on that. I think everyone's still working on that. And another thing I try to do is like look at it from both sides. Like if I hear about like a pipeline or something, I still try and listen to the other side, even though I probably might not agree with it. I can still like at least hear where another side is coming from, and also it helps so you can know where they're coming from and give them information that can kind of counterpoint their points if you want to to discuss stuff with people who are seeing stuff from a different side. And I think Zoe was also kind of talking about this, but like it's really important to really watch for your own mental health when you're seeing stuff about climate change, because it can be really damaging and there can be a lot of bad news these days. So definitely watch what you're consuming, make sure you don't get stuck just scrolling through tons of bad news and get stuck in that. Some resources I like is CBC, and I just found this new one called dailyclimate.org, and I really like it because it has this section you can go to which has just like a bunch of good news, and that's where I've heard about the coral reef thing, and it just has like a section so you can just see the good news, and if you ever need like a little break and see some good projects that are being done or some good moves that have been made, then yeah, that's a really good resource.
Yeah, I'm actually not a resource, but something that I was thinking about as Noah was talking is doom scrolling is definitely a thing. I find myself doing it on Twitter. I'll spend 20 minutes scrolling through my Twitter feed, and everyone is like, the world is on fire, everything's falling apart. So yeah, definitely finding those resources like Noel said that are truthful, but then also like offer these very like good news pieces. But kind of drawing on that doom scrolling, I think something that's really necessary is not just reading about things, not just hearing the information, but finding ways to get involved. I think that being involved in community, being involved in action, both helps you stay involved when you have people that are also kind of thinking about this, being able to ask somebody else, having community organizations as a resource of information, people that are close to what's happening, that know what's happening on the ground. But then I also think that reading about climate justice, climate change on your phone or on your computer brings a lot more kind of like frustration and grief than if you're doing that work on the ground, or if not on, not physically on the ground, virtually. There are a lot of ways to do virtual organizing, but being able to have that like, balance that information with action, and to say, even though this is happening, I know that we are doing something about it. And so there's hope that is inherent in action, I think.
So
Yeah,
as a follow-up, oh, go ahead, Shannon. Sorry.
No, I was going to comment on, yes, the doom scrolling, and so how mental health is so important. The people are taking care of themselves. I'm sorry, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I think of Joe Rogan, the shock jock podcast guy, who like presents so much misinformation but gets so much legitimacy, right? And it clearly you two are very educated on this issue. Like, how do you discern the clickbait? You said that, Noella, from like the real deal information. Do you just, what's your rubric? So what can help people out so they can discern between the ivermectin eaters and the, those who have the real 411?
That's definitely a very difficult thing that I'm still learning a lot about. I don't have a great answer for that. I wish I did, but just kind of, if you're unsure if something's true, I usually like to look at a few more sources and like see what's consistent with them all. And those are usually, not always, but usually the real facts. And I don't know, I think some sources just, well, I don't know. I want to be better at that. I want to learn more about how to tell what's true.
Yeah, I wish I had a better kind of process as well. I think what I usually do is my first contact with something will be on Twitter or maybe Instagram, and then I'll go to Google and Google the same thing to see if it pops up like, beyond an infographic, and then kind of be able to find, are there multiple articles on this? Are multiple people talking about it? Like, is this a real thing, or is this just like some frightening infographic about like an oil spill that I saw on my Instagram feed? So yeah, being able to kind of use use the internet in ways that clarify information.
And what's the source? Is the source a former MMA fighter, or are they actually a climate scientist? You know, who's the source? Y'all are spot on. Thank you.
So we have a question in here about the United Nations conference again. So we talked about it a little bit, but I have a question for you. So I know that my congregation in Dayton, Ohio, will shout out to Miami Valley Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Dayton, Ohio. Yeah.
Yay, Dayton! Dayton Flyers.
Oh yeah, you've heard about us.
How could you not?
Anyway, so the congregation has attended the United Nations conference in person for several years. And so like the question is like, what's happening now? This year is this week-long thing that's happening. So how do people get involved with like being a part of it? My understanding is that it's a little different than it was last year and how they're running it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, currently we're looking for some host congregations to host local gatherings in each area so that people will be able to attend those. And I think registration just opened if you want to attend the seminar. So that's pretty exciting. I think it just opened like this week. So that's some big news. I don't know if there's a link in the chat or something, but yeah, I think you can go to the website and you can find more information on both the host congregation thing and for registration.
Okay. I think we're sharing the link to that we should be sharing it in
Perfect.
our live stream. Yeah.
That's such an innovative model. I love it. You know, it's responsive to the times. It's multi-platform. It allows people to engage both in person and virtual, which, you know, I think we've all had our share of Zoom meetings, right? These last couple of years.
Yeah.
And we still want to meet safely.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
We really want to find a balance.
Yeah, and I love the idea of having congregations around the country. Going to New York was a great thing, but for a lot of people, that's a really far drive, far flight, or what have you. And I mean, like that also plays. I thought about that. That also plays into it, right? So we're having a climate justice event, and we're asking people to use a lot of fossil fuel to fly into it when maybe we don't need. So this is really innovative in that it's like really it's kind of like, you're doing what you're preaching, right? We're actually practicing what we preach, and keeping it small, but being able to connect and being, everyone being able to connect. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that was a big part of our decision. We were looking at like the different fossil fuel impacts of like different ways of doing it, and that was a really big. There was a really big like difference in the number of if you just have it locally or if everyone flies to New York. There was a huge dissonance. So yeah, that was definitely a big part of our decision.
So when the event unfolds, where will y'all be, and what will your role look like?
I think I'll still be in Vancouver. I'm pretty sure, as far as I know, and that's actually a good question. I don't know too much about my role. I guess I'll be doing a lot in the online components. I'll be doing most of my dean job, and I'm not sure how that will look in the local components.
Yeah, I'll be in Philadelphia at that time, so hopefully, I guess I'm close enough to New York that I could drive up there if there's a local gathering there, but maybe I'll be in Pennsylvania somewhere. Who knows where that local gathering will end up. But since I'm doing communications and publicity, most of my work will be leading up to the event, just getting the word out about registration and what you can expect from being a participant.
So how big is the team of people who are working on this? Like,
somewhere between 20 and 30 people, I would say. Does that sound right, Zoe?
Yeah, I think there's 4 or 5 people on my team, and there are like 5 teams. So yeah, I think that
Awesome.
sounds right.
And are these teams combined? Are they mostly youth and young adults? Are they combined with adults? Like, what is the ratio of young people involved?
Yeah, it's kind of all. We really do want youth engagement, but there's not too many youth on the team, unfortunately. But yeah, it's kind of everyone is involved.
Awesome. Awesome.
So we're in the home stretch, y'all. As always, I blinked and this episode has flown by. It's been incredible. And I really appreciate you both joining us this evening from your respective locales. To close us out, last question I'll throw y'all's way is, what can our listeners at home do to make a difference in their communities? If you're passionate about climate justice, how can folks get involved where they are? What would you recommend as their first step?
Well, I'm big on local action, and local action, I always say, leads to global change. So really, I want people to get involved in their local groups. And I think almost anywhere you go, if you look it up, like locally, like your climate action groups or any kind of environmental groups, there'll always be one there. And it's really good to like get involved with that. And maybe I like to bring a friend in to kind of keep us both committed and not kind of do it for a few days and drop out, but see what they're up to and see if there's anything that you're passionate about with people who are already doing the work and already have ideas and already have a place for you, because it can be very like disorienting to just kind of jump into something and you have no idea where to start. So it's great to get connected with people who are already doing the work. And other than that, just kind of make your voice heard, talk to local government and representatives for policy changes, write letters, sign petitions, call in to your local government, anything like that.
Yeah, definitely getting involved locally. And, I think it's scary to show up to new groups, but I think being able to take that first move and recognize how necessary it is to do that work. But I think also like on a personal level, being really intentional about like our relationship with nature. I think a goal for me this year, with it being New Year's and New Year's resolutions, not necessarily a resolution, but an intention for me is to just be more attuned to, the world around me, to be spend more time outside, take walks, learn about what my the indigenous like flora, fauna, being able to recognize the plants in my area, just being able to really connect with your place. Because I think when we feel connected to our place, we feel a responsibility for it almost. So having that reciprocity of this is the place that I live, this is the ground that I walk on, that fuels me, that nourishes me, and what can I do in return? So it just really, I think the work of recognizing the world that you are inhabiting is a really great first place to start.
That is a beautiful way to wrap this up. Thank you so much. Eric, did you want to talk about what's happening next?
Well, yeah, I see I'm listed on the script, but I just feel like I've been talking a lot. Do you want to share?
I knew you were going to say. I looked at the script and I was like, oh, it's Eric's turn, and I was like, I know that Eric's going to be like, yes, I would love to share. So next week, or not next week, oh, no. Next month, we are going to be welcoming to our show two guests. One, Matt Meyer and Karishma Gottfried from Sanctuary Boston. So we're going to talk about, if you're not familiar with Sanctuaries Boston, is it Sanctuary? I always get confused. Is it Sanctuary Boston or Sanctuaries Boston? Because I think it's Sanctuary Boston. Singular sanctuary, just one sanctuary. So if you aren't familiar with Sanctuary Boston, check them out before next month. They do online worship services. They're amazing. I had the pleasure of attending Sanctuary Boston in person when I've been in Boston, and it's also wonderful. But we're going to talk to them about doing innovative and creative worship services, how they put those together and do the work of, it's very young adult led. It's a very young adult led space. So we're
But
excited.
intergenerational, like everyone's
yeah.
welcome.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should say it's young adult led, as in they're leading, and then also everyone is welcome. Yes, totally intergenerational. In fact, there were little children there when I was there, and all the way up to old people, older people. Sorry. I'm gonna stop now. I've been talking too much, obviously.
Well, hey, for those of you who are tuning in, please be sure to like and subscribe to this page. Follow us on Instagram at Just Breathe Live with 2 U's in Just, and spread the word. Shannon, will you whoosh us out?
Yes, it's time for our whoosh. Our whoosh is our ending. So we're gonna have a deep breath in, and then whoosh. We're done. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks again, Zoe and Noella.